Merry Christmas! I know it's not Christmas yet, but it is December, the best time of the year. Christmas is right around the corner, but in honor of this amazing holiday, I'm going to be reviewing nothing but classic Christmas movies. And to start this season off, I'm going to give you another installment of
Revenge of the Remakes.
So the Miracle on 34th Street movies are an interesting case because the remake changes very little from the original. The biggest change is that it's no longer set in 1947, but instead moved up to 1994, the year it came out. But as for the story itself, they basically follow the same plot points. It opens on a Thanksgiving Day parade where the Santa has been intoxicated and Kris Kringle needs to substitute last minute. And this brings us to the first big difference between the two versions. In the original, the parade was hosted by Macy's, and this is the best product placement Macy's could have ever hoped for in a movie. The 34th Street store and the Macy's Corporation as a whole is such a key player in this story. They really can't tell this story without Macy's. Macy's had the Thanksgiving Day parade, Macy's had the Santa Claus at the end of the parade, and the meet and greets afterwards. This is Macy's movie. But for whatever reason, Macy's didn't want their name attached to the remake. They opted out of that, so they had to change Macy's to Kohl's. No, not that Kohl's. Just Kohl's. And this change does have ramifications that I will get to later, but for now, just know that in the original, it's Macy's, and in the remake, it's Kohl's. But anyway, the old man known as Kris Kringle has to substitute as Santa Claus for the parade, and then later on in the store itself for the meet and greets. And in both versions, he's hired by this hardened mother that went through a messy divorce, has this young daughter, and the two of them have no faith in Santa or magic or fairy tales, no fantasies of any kind. They're very cynical people. And for a little girl who's, between the ages of 8 and 10, she's had to grow up pretty fast, and because of that, she has no imagination, she has no fun in her life. And of course, this is offset by the kind lawyer across the street. There's so many of them. And he's constantly trying to get Susie, the daughter, and by extension, the mother, Doris, to come out of their shell and have a little fun with life. But then as the story goes on, Kris Kringle, the old man that they hired as Santa Claus, starts making some pretty bold claims that he is in fact the one and only Santa Claus, and he substantiates it in a pretty convincing way. But not too substantial, because everybody else pretty much assumes that he's just crazy. So crazy, in fact, that through a series of unfortunate events, he gets himself committed to a mental institution, and now Kris has to go through a hearing with the kind lawyer down the hall defending him. And the public nature of this hearing, that Santa Claus is on trial, the only way for Kris to be released is if they can legally prove that he is the one and only Santa Claus. And because this is a Christmas miracle story, they end up winning the case, and everybody lives happily ever after. So both versions follow this storyline pretty much to a T, but if you really want to figure out which one's better and where one succeeds and the other one fails, you gotta look at the smaller details. And for me, a lot of that comes through in the casting and how the characters are portrayed. For instance, let's start with Kris Kringle himself. He's the main character of this story. In the original, he's played by Edmund Gwynn, and in the remake, he's played by Richard Attenborough. Now, both of these actors bring a lot to their portrayals of Santa. They both bring the wit and sharpness of mind whenever they're questioned about whether or not they are Santa. There are some really fantastic lines in both versions where he doesn't lie, but he does circumvent the question because he knows nobody's gonna believe him. Both Santas have an instantaneous connection with children, although the way they go about it is a little different. Richard Attenborough has a very authoritative relationship with the children. He is the adult in the room, and the children look up to him, and he looks down on them with love and kindness, but at the same time, he doesn't treat them as equals. He treats them as children, but I guess more specifically as his children. He deeply cares about these kids, and if I have to sum up Attenborough's Santa, he is just kindness. He's jolly, he smiles, he loves everything he does. A great Santa. But now let's look at Edmund Gwynn, because I do think that he is the better Santa. Because while he still has that kindness and connection with the kids, it goes a little deeper than Attenborough. Because while he's playing with the kids, or just talking to anybody, he sees them all as equals. He never talks down to anybody, especially the kids. And when he does feel the need to correct an inaccuracy of how a Santa Claus is being represented, he does correct it, but at the same time, he shows such kindness and compassion, and he's trying to give everybody the benefit of the doubt and see where this misconception has come from. And I like that better. I like that Santa Claus can really get down on a kid's level and play with a child like he is a child himself. It's not just a good trait in the Santa Claus, it's also a really good parenting technique. But even though I'm already leaning more towards Edmund Gwynn's portrayal, the really big thing that clinches it for him is the look. Now, Richard Attenborough's Santa has a really nice red suit, and you can tell that it's not just your average mall Santa. There's gold buttons, and he's got a Christmas ring. The costume design went above and beyond with that version. Now, Richard Attenborough is a fantastic actor. At the time this movie was made, I don't know who else I would have picked. But for me, when I see Richard Attenborough Santa, I just see the owner of Jurassic Park. I don't see Santa, I see an actor playing Santa with him. And for me, that's kind of a problem, because with this whole story, the audience, along with everybody else in the movie, needs to be convinced that this guy is the one and only Santa, at least to some degree. But Edmund Gwynn, just look at the guy. That is Santa. That's the Santa that you see on the Coke ads. That's the Santa you see in Hallmark cards. That's the Santa that you've seen your entire childhood. I mean, look at that beard. That's a Santa beard if ever I saw one. And Richard Attenborough's beard it can't compete. It can't compete with the sheer length of that beard. And while Edmund Gwynn was acting, and he has had many credits to his name, he wasn't nearly as big a name as Richard Attenborough was, and people didn't know his face as well. He was often delegated to minor roles, background characters, bit parts, and Miracle on 34th Street was the first time that we saw this guy for an extended period of time, and when I look at him, I don't see an actor playing Santa, I just see Santa himself. But let's move on to some of the other characters. You've got Mrs. Walker, the cynical mom that doesn't believe in anything. In the original, she was played by Maureen O'Hara, and in the remake, she was played by Elizabeth Perkins. And both actresses do a phenomenal job, and this is a great part. There's a lot of depth here, because in both versions, they don't really go into detail about what happened to make her so cynical. You know that she was married. You know that he was not around anymore. It definitely left an impact on her, and that's why she's cynical. But we don't see it, and we don't get a whole lot of details as to what exactly happened that ruined the relationship. And both actresses nail that complexity to the character. And which actress you like better really comes down to your own personal opinion. For me, it is, again, the original with Maureen O'Hara. Both actresses bring a sadness to the role. But if you've ever seen someone that's gone through a messy divorce or has become cynical with age, they often put on a very stoic front, don't really let any emotion shine through. It's only when you actually get to know the person deeper and they start to deconstruct some of those walls that they've built up from the hurt, that's when you start to get to the truer emotion. And with Maureen O'Hara, she plays that perfectly. She's very stoic. She doesn't let anybody in until those walls start to crumble through repeated contact with the lawyer and Kris Kringle. But Elizabeth Perkins doesn't play it that way. She plays it more straightforward. She's sad, she's angry, she's emotional. You get more of a sense that she's sad because there's something lacking in her life. And while that's true in both cases, the original plays a lot more subtle and realistic than in the remake. In the remake, I mean, she looks like she's about to burst out in tears every other scene, which does make the film more dramatic, I'll give it that. But it really comes down to your own opinion. Do you want a more over-the-top dramatic role, or do you want a more subtle, realistic role? For me, I choose the subtlety every time. And this same difference translates into the daughter too. In both versions, you get fantastic actresses. In the original, you get a very young Natalie Wood, who you may recognize as Maria from West Side Story. And in the remake, you get arguably the most popular child actress at the time, Mara Wilson. And in both versions, they play this extremely intelligent, well-spoken, cynical kid, again thanks to her mom. But again, just like the mom herself, the biggest difference is that Natalie Wood plays it like a kid who's known the truth about the world for some time and is content with this cynical outlook on the world because that's what she knows. Mara Wilson, on the other hand, plays it a lot more dramatically, like her mom. She knows the truth about the world. She's intelligent, well-spoken, even with that lisp that some people find adorable but I just find irritating. She also has this sadness that while she knows the truth, she hasn't really accepted it. She's still very cut up about it and doesn't want it to be true, which for me kind of makes the story a little more confusing because it already puts her in a position where she's more willing to accept Kris Kringle's story, and it undercuts the weight of trying to convince this very cynical family that there is a Santa Claus. The kid already wants to believe it, so there's nothing too miraculous that can happen. And really the last major character that I want to touch on is the friendly lawyer down the street. Now, I haven't used his name yet because this is actually a pretty strange change. All the other names have kept the same, you know, Kris Kringle, Doris Walker, although in the remake they call her Dory, so small change but not that big of a deal. And the daughter's name is Susan. The lawyer down the street in the original is named Mr. Gailey, and in the remake he's called Mr. Bedford. Now, aside from an It's a Wonderful Life reference, I have no idea why they made this change. And both actors do a fine job. This part really isn't the most complex. The only qualities each actor needs to represent well is kindness, patience, optimism, and faith. If you have those four things, you have a pretty good representation of this character. And it's all there in both versions, but with one significant difference. And how you feel about this change may say more about you than it does about the movie, because how you value this is a matter of opinion. And it's that in the original, Mr. Gailey spends a lot more time with Susan than he does with Doris Walker. And the film itself brings this up because I guess Mr. Gailey somewhere read that the best way to get the attention of the mother is to be nice to the kid. But even after he's gotten the attention of the mother, he's still very fond of Susan and spends a lot of time developing that relationship. But in the remake, Mr. Bedford spends a lot more time with Dory Walker than he does with Susan. Now again, these two portrayals are so similar that I honestly don't have a favorite, but that difference of whether or not he spends more time with the child or spends more time with the actual woman he loves, depending on your opinions on dating, that may make a difference. For me, it doesn't make that much of a difference, but if I had to choose, I think I would lean slightly more to the original just because I like kids. And I think it's a great thing when adults play with kids, in a safe environment, because it gives kids role models and people to look up to and all kinds of great things. And in the case of Susan specifically, it gives her a father figure that she's been without for a long time. So that about wraps up all the main characters. Now, of course, in both versions, there are some really good character actors that play bit parts and give a little more flavor to the story. And some of these include the judges in both versions. The mom on Black Friday played so much better by Thelma Ritter in the original. Thelma Ritter is just one of my favorite character actresses. She can bring so much to a small part, and Miracle on 34th Street's no exception. But that's just to name a couple. There's so many just small interactions with people in both versions that you never see again, but leave such an impression. They do a great job to flesh out the world that everyone's living in. But now let's dig deep into the story of each version to see what is different. Like I said before, the original is all about Macy's. Macy's name is all over the place, the Macy's store. Even the title itself, Miracle on 34th Street, references the 34th Street Macy's. The big one in New York City that the parade goes by every year. So again, it's hard to detach this movie from Macy's if Macy's doesn't want its name on it anymore. And in the remake, they replace it with the fictional store of Kohl's. And this is an interesting difference as to how it affects the story, because with fictional companies, you can paint them as greedy, as irresponsible, as devious and scheming as you want. And because of this, the remake has a very low opinion of capitalism and spends a lot of time depicting both companies as not exactly taking the moral high ground, to the point where the violent incident that makes Santa Claus become incarcerated in the first place was set up by Kohl's competitor as some form of corporate sabotage. And if you find that interesting and that it leads to more drama, more power to you. But for me, I prefer the original, where the companies definitely had their own greedy self-interest at heart. But because of Kris Kringle's Santa Claus and his brilliant marketing technique of sending people to other stores to get the better item, the two corporations actually come together and become more friendly with each other, to the point where you see them shaking hands with each other and trying to one-up each other in how they can repay Santa for all the good that he's done. It's just a much more uplifting and optimistic look, and in a cheesy Christmas movie, that's what I'm looking for. And that brings me to my final thought, and really the big difference between the two versions. Look at the original 1947 version. It is very much set in the real world of 1947. Everybody talks and acts very naturally, very much like how real people in this ridiculous situation would talk and react. Nobody looks like they're overacting or playing a part. Everyone has just fully embraced the complexities of their character, Santa Claus being chief among them, and play it very naturally. And because of that, the world of the 1947 version mirrors our world a lot closer. And it takes an incredible actor and an incredible portrayal of Santa Claus to convince the audience and the people in this more realistic setting that he is the one and only Santa Claus. And this movie pulls both of those things off. It creates a more realistic world, and it gives us an incredible Santa Claus that we can get behind and believe that he is the one and only, even though we never actually see anything miraculous or supernatural come from this version of Kris Kringle. The movie leaves it very ambiguous as to whether or not Santa Claus actually exists, and even more so whether or not he is who he says he is, or if he's just crazy and making it all up. The movie never officially says, but it's through Edmund Gwen's portrayal of Santa and the earnestness that comes through his acting. We 100% believe it, and when the characters in the movie have that switch, we buy it. It seems completely reasonable and even more profound because, again, he's not Jesus or Moses. He's not showing these incredible miracles that can't be explained. All the evidence just boils down to how he treats people and how he carries himself, and that alone is enough to bring faith to the faithless. But now you take the remake. The remake is set in a very different world than the original. It's set in 1994, but at the same time, it's not set in our 1994. Unlike the original, this is not a close reflection of the real world. This is very much a stylized, overproduced Hollywood movie. And by making the corporations more sinister, the leads more emotional, and the cinematography and storyline more dramatic, it feels less like our world and more of a magical world where Santa Claus could actually exist. Actually, a very apt comparison to this version in both set design, style, and how people in the world treat the character of Santa Claus is Tim Allen's The Santa Claus. Because again, it's not the real world that these movies are depicting. It's a stylized fantasy world where Santa Claus could exist. Now, neither version goes so far as turning water into wine or parting the Red Sea, but take this one instance at the very end of the movie. Susan's big wish is to have this picturesque home in the suburbs that she found in a catalog to live with her mom and hopefully Mr. Gailey. Now, Santa Claus throughout the whole movie in both versions tells her that this is a very tall order and that she may not actually get it. But in the end, she finds the house and it's for sale. And in the original, it's left very ambiguous whether or not they actually buy the house. And furthermore, whether or not it was actually Kris Kringle that was involved in setting this whole thing up. The only indication we get is a very familiar looking cane in a fireplace that may or may not be the same one that Kris Kringle carries around. But in the remake, it is made very clear that this is a miracle brought about by Kris Kringle. And not only that, but they officially own the house, they move right in, and it's a done deal. That kind of thing happens a lot more in the remake than in the original. Because this is set in more of a fantasy world, it makes more sense for Santa Claus to confirm his involvement in these miraculous things. Where in the original, they leave a lot of it up to your own interpretation. And that about wraps up Miracle on 34th Street. I know this review has been kind of hard on the remake, but I really do enjoy it. It is a good remake of a fantastic original. Again, the original is just so well done in both how it's acted, how it's performed, how the world is created, the pacing of it. Everything in the original definitely stands the test of time. And if you want to check it out, it's on Disney Plus right now. It may be available other places, but really do give this a watch. It is a fantastic movie. And the remake isn't half bad. The remake may be more readily available on cable if you have it. It is December after all, and cable channels do like to play this one. But now I leave it to you guys. Comment below. What version do you like the best? Which one really does stand out to you as just bringing you that good old-fashioned Christmas spirit? For me, it's the original, but like I said, both versions are good, and it really comes down to your opinion, so let me know. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. And next week, I'm continuing this Christmas series with yet another Michael Curtiz movie, White Christmas. Yeah, because the guy who brought us Captain Blood and Robin Hood is definitely my first choice for a musical. But stay tuned for that, and as always, I'm Colby. This was my nerdy talk, and I'll see you in the next video.